You feel like life is constantly attacking you from all sides: work pressures, relationship conflicts, financial stress, and you're always reacting instead of controlling the situation. Every day becomes a series of battles you didn't choose, while others seem to navigate life's challenges with strategic calm and always come out ahead. I am Sun Tzu, the ancient strategist who mastered the art of winning before the battle begins. And for over 2,500 years, my principles have guided victorious leaders through life's greatest conflicts. The war principles I'll share will transform you from someone who merely survives life's battles into someone who wins them decisively. The battlefield may have changed from ancient China to modern life, but the principles of strategy and positioning remain as powerful today. But first, like this video, subscribe for more ancient wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready for strategic mastery. When I first held my wooden practice sword as a young student in ancient China, I thought warfare was about strength and courage. The crude training weapon felt heavy in my small hands, its rough surface a reminder that I was still learning the most basic elements of combat. My master would watch me struggle with the simplest forms, shaking his head as I tried to overpower my opponents through brute force alone. I remember the day everything changed. I was sparring with an older student who had defeated me countless times before. Once again, I charged forward with all my might, wooden sword raised high, determined to crush him through sheer determination. He stepped aside effortlessly, and I stumbled past him, my own momentum carrying me to the ground. As I lay there in the dust, humiliated and frustrated, my master approached. "Sun Tzu," he said quietly, "you are fighting the wrong battle." I looked up at him, confused and angry. "What do you mean?" "I'm fighting him, just as you taught me." "No," he replied, helping me to my feet. "You are fighting yourself. You are fighting your own impatience, your own need to prove something, your own fear of appearing weak. Until you win those battles first, you will never win against any opponent." That moment changed my entire understanding of conflict. I began to see that every external battle was really an internal one first. The enemy across from me was not my true opponent. My own mind was my own assumptions, emotions, and reactions were what determined victory or defeat before the first blow was struck. I started studying not just combat techniques, but human nature itself. I watched how fear affected decision-making, how anger clouded judgment, how desperation led to predictable mistakes. I learned to observe my own emotions as carefully as I observed my opponent's movements. When I felt anger rising, I would pause and ask myself what strategic advantage it might give my enemy. When I felt afraid, I would examine whether that fear was based on reality or imagination. Through years of this internal work, I discovered something remarkable. The more I mastered my own mind, the more clearly I could see others' mental states. I could predict their actions, not because I was psychic, but because I understood the patterns of human behavior under pressure. Fear, anger, pride, and desperation all created predictable responses. My first real victory came not on a practice field, but in my own heart. I faced the same opponent who had defeated me so many times before, but this time I was different. I wasn't fighting to prove my strength or courage. I wasn't fighting to avoid humiliation. I was simply present, aware, and strategic. When he attacked, I didn't try to overpower him. I redirected his energy, used his momentum against him, and won without violence. That wooden practice sword taught me that discipline comes before mastery, that understanding yourself comes before understanding others, and that the greatest victories happen in the mind before they happen in the world. These lessons served me through every campaign I would later lead, every strategy I would develop, and every principle I would teach. You face the same challenge today. Whether you're dealing with a difficult boss, navigating family conflicts, or pursuing ambitious goals, your greatest opponent is not external. It's the reactive, emotional, undisciplined part of your own mind that makes you predictable to others and ineffective in your actions. I still keep the unopened letter that changed my understanding of true victory. It sits in my private chambers, its wax seal intact after all these years. A message of surrender from an enemy general who capitulated before our armies ever met. On the battlefield, this letter represents the highest form of strategic achievement, winning without fighting. The campaign began like many others. Intelligence reports indicated a formidable enemy force gathering strength in the eastern provinces. Their general was experienced, his troops were well trained, and they held defensive positions that would cost us dearly to assault. Traditional military thinking would have called for immediate attack, while we held numerical superiority. But I had learned something far more powerful than overwhelming force. I understood that every conflict is psychological before it becomes physical. Wars are won in the minds of commanders before they are won on battlefields. Instead of marching directly toward confrontation, I began a different kind of campaign. First, I studied my opponent's character through our intelligence network. I learned he was proud, ambitious, and deeply concerned about his reputation among his own troops. He had never retreated from battle and prided himself on personal courage. These seemed like strengths, but I recognized them as strategic vulnerabilities. Next, I began a series of movements that appeared aggressive but were actually designed to create psychological pressure. We moved our forces in sight of his scouts, but never close enough to force engagement. We demonstrated our capabilities through training exercises his spies would observe and report back. We allowed captured prisoners to escape with stories of our overwhelming strength and advanced tactics. Most importantly, I began spreading carefully crafted information about our intentions. Through merchants, travelers, and other informal channels, word reached his camp that we planned to bypass his position entirely and attack his homeland directly. This wasn't deception for its own sake. Was strategic misdirection designed to create an impossible decision. The psychological pressure built over weeks. His troops, seeing our apparent strength and hearing rumors of our plans, began to question the wisdom of their position. His advisors, recognizing the strategic trap we had created, urged him to reconsider his options. Most crucially, he began to doubt himself. The unopened letter arrived on a morning when fog shrouded both our camps. His messenger approached under a flag of truce, carrying terms of surrender that gave us everything we could have won through battle, but without the cost in lives, resources, or time that victory would have required. I never opened that letter, because its contents mattered less than what it represented. The supreme excellence is not winning 100 victories in 100 battles, is subduing the enemy without fighting at all. The greatest triumph is achieving your objectives, while preserving your resources and maintaining your strength for future challenges. This principle transforms everything when applied to modern life. In your career, the highest achievement isn't defeating colleagues. In office politics, it's positioning yourself so that opportunities come to you naturally. In relationships, the greatest success isn't winning arguments, it's creating conditions where conflicts don't arise because everyone's interests align. The next time you face a challenging situation, ask yourself, how can I achieve my objective without direct confrontation? How can I create conditions where others choose to give me what I want? How can I win before the battle begins? This is the path of supreme excellence. Hidden in my private quarters, I kept a scroll that no advisor ever saw, no historian ever recorded, and no enemy ever captured. Written in my own hand, it contained the most dangerous information in my possession, a complete and honest assessment of my personal weaknesses, blind spots, and limitations. I called it my personal weakness scroll, and consulting it daily may have been the most important habit of my entire career. Most leaders surround themselves with flattery and confirmation of their brilliance. They avoid uncomfortable truths about their shortcomings, preferring the comfort of self-deception to the pain of honest self-examination. This is exactly why most leaders eventually fail. They become victims of their own success, blind to the weaknesses that their enemies can see clearly. I learned this lesson early in my military career. During a campaign that should have been a simple victory, I was confident, perhaps overconfident, leading a force against what appeared to be a weaker enemy. My troops were better trained, my supplies were adequate, and my position seemed advantageous. Yet we found ourselves in serious difficulty because I had failed to account for my own tendency toward impatience. The enemy commander understood something about me that I had not yet admitted to myself when facing what appeared to be easy victory. I became careless about details. He deliberately presented weak defenses that triggered my impatience, drawing me into terrain where my advantages became liabilities. What should have been a quick victory became a grinding campaign that taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. That night, after nearly losing everything through my own character flaw, I created my personal weakness scroll. I wrote down every limitation I could identify: my impatience with prolonged campaigns, my tendency to underestimate enemies who appeared weak, my difficulty delegating to subordinates I didn't fully trust, and my pride in my own tactical innovations that sometimes blinded me to simpler solutions. But this wasn't an exercise in self-criticism. It was strategic intelligence gathering about my most important asset and liability, myself. Just as I gathered intelligence about enemy capabilities, I needed complete information about my own. Every strength carried corresponding weaknesses. My speed in decision-making could become recklessness. My confidence could become arrogance. My independence could become isolation. I updated this scroll regularly, adding new insights as I discovered them, removing items as I corrected them, and maintaining absolute honesty about areas where I remained vulnerable. Before every major decision, I would consult this document and ask myself, which of my weaknesses might my opponents exploit? How might my natural tendencies lead me astray in this situation? This practice of radical self-honesty became the foundation of all my strategic success. When you know your own weaknesses as clearly as you know your strengths, you can compensate for them, protect against them, and even turn them into strategic advantages by ensuring they don't blind you to reality. In your own life, most failures come not from external opposition, but from internal blind spots. The colleague who gets promoted over you may not be more talented. They may simply know themselves better and position their strengths more strategically. The relationship that fails may not be doomed by incompatibility, but by your refusal to acknowledge patterns in your own behavior that create conflict. Create your own personal weakness scroll. Write down your honest limitations, review it regularly, and use this self-knowledge as strategic intelligence for navigating life's challenges. In my command tent, I maintained a collection of clay tablets that my enemies would have killed to destroy detailed intelligence records about every opposing force I might face. These tablets contained information about enemy commanders' personalities, their troops' morale, their supply situations, their tactical preferences, and most importantly, their fears and motivations. This network of clay tablets represented something crucial. You cannot defeat what you do not understand. I learned the vital importance of intelligence gathering during my second major campaign, when I faced an opponent whose reputation for tactical brilliance had preceded him across the region. Traditional scouts reported his troop movements and formations, but I realized this surface-level information was insufficient. I needed to understand the man himself, how he thought, what drove him, where his confidence came from, and what would shake it through careful cultivation of sources, merchants who traded in his territory, soldiers who had served under him previously, even servants from his household. I built a complete picture of my opponent. I discovered he was deeply superstitious, consulting oracles before major decisions. He was also intensely proud of his reputation for never losing a battle, which meant he feared failure more than death. Armed with this psychological intelligence, I designed a campaign that targeted his mind rather than just his forces. I arranged for him to receive reports through his own intelligence network that his oracles in distant temples were predicting his defeat. I conducted movements that appeared to violate conventional military wisdom, creating the impression that I possessed superior knowledge or divine favor. Most importantly, I created situations where his desire to maintain his perfect record forced him into increasingly defensive positions. His fear of losing his first battle made him so cautious that he lost strategic initiative, eventually placing himself exactly where I needed him to be for decisive action. The victory that followed was total, but it began with understanding that my true enemy was not his army, it was his psychology, his motivations, his fears, and his blind spots. This principle transforms how you approach any challenging relationship or competitive situation in modern life. Your difficult boss is not your enemy because of their position. They become problematic because of their insecurities, their pressure from above, their fear of being replaced, or their need to prove themselves. Understanding these motivations gives you strategic options beyond direct confrontation in negotiations. Most people focus on what they want without truly understanding what the other party needs, fears, or values. But when you invest time in genuinely understanding others' perspectives, you can craft proposals that serve your interests while addressing their deeper concerns. The key is gathering this intelligence ethically and systematically. Listen to what people say about their priorities and fears. Observe how they react under pressure. Notice what kind of recognition they seek and what criticism affects them most deeply. Pay attention to their patterns of decision-making and the principles they consistently apply. This isn't about manipulation, it's about understanding. When you truly understand others' motivations and constraints, you can find ways to achieve your objectives that also serve their interests. You can avoid triggering their defensive reactions and instead create conditions where cooperation becomes their preferred choice. Remember, every person you encounter has fears, desires, pressures, and blind spots that influence their behavior. Understanding these psychological landscapes gives you strategic advantages that force and confrontation never can. Among my most prized possessions were a set of false battle plans, deliberately misleading documents. I crafted 4 enemy spies to discover. These papers contained detailed strategies that appeared authentic but were designed to misdirect opponents into preparing for battles I never intended to fight. They represent one of my most misunderstood principles. All warfare is based on deception. Let me clarify what this means, because it's often interpreted as advocacy for dishonesty. Strategic deception is not about lying, it's about controlling information flow and managing perceptions to create advantages. It's about appearing weak when you are strong, appearing strong when you are weak, and appearing to be somewhere you are not. During one crucial campaign, I faced an enemy force that significantly outnumbered my own troops. Direct confrontation would have been suicide, but I recognized an opportunity to use their numerical advantage against them. I deliberately allowed their scouts to observe what appeared to be a massive supply train moving toward a distant valley, a slow, vulnerable target that suggested we were establishing a permanent camp there. What their scouts actually observed was an elaborate deception. The supply wagons were mostly empty, pulled by local farmers I had hired for this purpose. My actual forces were moving through different routes to positions that would give us decisive advantages when the enemy committed to attacking our false position. The beauty of this strategy was that it required no lies, no broken promises, no unethical behavior. I simply controlled what information was available and allowed my opponents to draw conclusions that served my purposes. When they attacked where they expected to find us, we were elsewhere, positioned to strike where they were vulnerable. This principle applies powerfully to modern life, but it must be understood correctly. In your career, strategic deception might mean not revealing your full capabilities until the right moment to maximize impact. It might mean allowing competitors to underestimate you while you develop decisive advantages. It might mean managing expectations so that your achievements exceed what others anticipate in negotiations. It could mean appearing less interested in outcomes you desperately want, or more flexible on points where you cannot compromise. The key is managing perception without compromising your integrity or making false statements. Consider job interviews, where strategic misdirection might involve emphasizing certain experiences while allowing less relevant background to remain unnoticed, or appearing humble about accomplishments while ensuring they are clearly understood. You're not lying about your qualifications, you're presenting them strategically. In competitive business situations, this might mean keeping your strategic intentions private while gathering intelligence about competitors' plans. It might mean launching smaller initiatives that misdirect attention from larger strategic moves you're developing. The ethical boundary is crucial. Strategic deception involves controlling information flow and managing perceptions, but it never involves dishonesty, broken commitments, or harm to others. The goal is creating strategic advantages through superior information management, not through unethical behavior. Remember that others are already using these principles, consciously or unconsciously. Your competitors are managing their own information flow and trying to understand yours. The question is whether you will approach this strategically and ethically, or whether you will remain naive about the information. Dynamics that influence every competitive situation you encounter. Master the art of strategic misdirection while maintaining absolute integrity in your commitments and relationships. On my desk lies a map from my fastest military victory campaign completed in 3 days that conventional wisdom suggested would require months. The Lightning Campaign Map, as I called it, shows not just troop movements, but timing sequences that created unstoppable momentum through perfect coordination of speed and opportunity. This map taught me that in strategy, timing is not everything, it is the only thing. The opportunity arose when intelligence reports revealed that 2 enemy forces were moving to unite against us. Separately, each was manageable, but together, they would create overwhelming opposition. Conventional military thinking would have suggested defensive positioning while seeking reinforcements or allies. Instead, I recognized that we had perhaps 72 hours before their convergence made victory impossible. Most commanders would have spent days planning, consulting advisors, and ensuring perfect preparation before acting. But I understood something crucial: perfect timing with adequate preparation beats perfect preparation with poor timing every time. Windows of opportunity open and close according to their own logic, not according to our readiness. I made the decision to strike immediately with the forces and plans we had available rather than wait for ideal conditions that might never come. We moved at night, covering distances that seemed impossible to enemy scouts. We attacked the first force at dawn before they fully understood our approach, achieved rapid victory, then immediately pivoted to intercept the second force before they learned of their allies' defeat. The key was not just speed of movement, but speed of decision-making. Every hour we spent in planning would have been an hour closer to the enemy convergence that would doom our chances. I compressed our planning cycle from days to hours, accepted good enough intelligence instead of perfect information, and committed to adaptation during execution rather than perfect preparation beforehand. This lightning campaign succeeded because we moved faster than our enemies could think. They were still preparing for the war they expected when we had already won the war that actually happened. The same principle determines success in modern competitive situations. Markets move faster than business plans. Opportunities appear and disappear while people are still scheduling meetings to discuss them. Relationships and career openings evolve according to their own timelines, not according to your convenience. I have watched countless capable people fail not because they lacked skill or knowledge, but because they prioritized preparation over timing. They spent months perfecting proposals for opportunities that disappeared during their preparation period. They waited for ideal conditions that never materialized, while competitors seized advantages with imperfect but timely action. The modern economy rewards rapid response more than perfect preparation. The job that perfectly matches your skills may be filled while you're polishing your resume. The business opportunity you're researching may be captured by someone who moves faster with less information. The relationship you're carefully considering may develop with someone who acts while you deliberate. This doesn't mean acting recklessly or without thought. It means recognizing when delay costs more than imperfection, when good enough now beats perfect later, and when the window of opportunity is more important than the completeness of your preparation. Learn to distinguish between decisions that require extensive analysis and decisions that require rapid response. Develop your ability to make strong choices with incomplete information. Most importantly, remember that perfect timing with good execution beats perfect execution with poor timing in almost every strategic situation you will encounter. I preserve a document that many would consider evidence of cowardice, but I consider proof of wisdom. A formal scroll declining a challenge to battle when conditions were unfavorable. The declined challenge scroll represents one of my most important strategic decisions, the courage to walk away from a fight I could not win. True strength is not fighting every battle, but choosing only battles that serve your larger strategy. The challenge came from a rival commander, whose reputation was built on personal combat victories. He had publicly questioned my courage and tactical abilities, demanding immediate engagement to settle our differences. His forces were well rested and positioned advantageously, while my troops were recovering from a difficult campaign. Honor demanded that I accept his challenge. Wisdom demanded that I decline. My advisors were divided. Some argued that refusing would damage my reputation and encourage other enemies to test my resolve. Others recognized that engaging under unfavorable conditions could destroy everything we had built in previous campaigns. The decision was mine alone, and it would define not just this moment, but my entire strategic legacy. I chose wisdom over pride. In my formal response, I acknowledged his challenge, but explained that I would engage him when conditions served my strategic purposes, not his. I stated clearly that I was prepared to fight, but only when timing and circumstances gave my forces reasonable chances of victory. This decision required more courage than accepting his challenge would have. It's easy to be brave for a few hours. In battle, it's much harder to be strategically patient for months or years, while others question your resolve. But strategic patience proved correct. 6 months later, when his forces were scattered and my position was stronger, we met under circumstances that favored my tactics and objectives. The victory was decisive precisely because I had waited for the right moment. This principle transforms how you approach conflicts in modern life. Every workplace has people who will challenge your ideas, question your decisions, or compete for the same opportunities. The reactive response is to engage every challenge immediately, trying to prove yourself through constant confrontation. The strategic response is to evaluate which battles serve your larger objectives and which are distractions from your real goals. That colleague who publicly questions your proposals in meetings may be trying to draw you into political battles that serve their agenda, not yours. The competitor who challenges your market position may be hoping you'll overreact and make costly defensive moves that weaken your strategic position. The family member who consistently creates conflict may be seeking attention through confrontation that drains energy from more important relationships. Strategic battle selection requires asking crucial questions before engaging. What do I gain if I win this fight? What do I lose even if I win? Does this conflict serve my larger objectives or distract from them? Am I being drawn into this battle for someone else's strategic purposes? Sometimes the most powerful response to a challenge is strategic non-engagement. Sometimes the best answer to provocation is patience. Sometimes declining to fight when conditions are unfavorable demonstrates more strength than accepting every challenge presented to you. Remember that your time, energy, and emotional resources are finite. Every battle you choose to fight is a battle you cannot fight elsewhere. Choose conflicts that advance your strategic position, not just ones that satisfy your immediate emotional needs. The warrior who wins the most battles is not necessarily the one who achieves the most strategic success. I wear a simple medallion that represents one of my most valuable strategic assets, a token given to me by a local mountain guide whose knowledge of hidden passes allowed my forces to achieve what seemed impossible. The Foreign Scout's medallion reminds me that local knowledge often matters more than superior numbers, better equipment, or even brilliant strategy. Sometimes the key to victory lies not in what you know, but in whom you know. The campaign that earned me this medallion began with what appeared to be an insurmountable challenge. Enemy forces held a fortified position that commanded the only known route through a treacherous mountain range. Direct assault would have been costly and uncertain. A prolonged siege would have allowed enemy reinforcements to arrive. Retreat would have given them strategic advantages in the broader conflict. My maps showed no alternatives. My scouts reported no viable options, and my advisors recommended either costly assault or dangerous withdrawal. But I had learned something important about the limitations of outside expertise. Those who know a territory from maps and brief observation understand it differently than those who have lived there for generations. I sought out local people, farmers, herders, traders, hunters, anyone who might possess knowledge that formal intelligence gathering had missed. Most had little to offer, but one elderly guide mentioned paths his grandfather had used to move livestock through hidden valleys. These routes were not marked on any map, would not accommodate large forces, but might allow smaller units to reach positions behind enemy lines. I spent 3 days with this guide, learning routes that existed nowhere in written form, but were preserved in local memory, passed down through families. The knowledge was invaluable, but equally important was the relationship itself. This guide had no military training, but his understanding of weather patterns, seasonal changes, and local conditions exceeded anything my trained officers possessed. The resulting victory was achieved not through superior force or brilliant tactics, but through local knowledge that gave us options our enemies never considered. We appeared where they believed appearance was impossible, struck where they thought themselves secure, and achieved objectives that conventional military wisdom deemed unattainable. This experience taught me that every environment, whether a physical territory, an organization, a market, or a social group, contains knowledge that outsiders cannot access through formal study alone. Insider knowledge comes from lived experience, relationship networks, and cultural understanding that no amount of external research can replicate in your career. Local guides might be administrative assistants who understand how decisions really get made, long-time employees who know which initiatives succeed and which fail, or customers who understand market dynamics better than formal research reveals. In new cities, local guides help you understand not just where things are located, but how systems actually work. The key is recognizing that needing local knowledge is not a weakness, it's strategic intelligence. The most successful leaders actively seek relationships with people who possess insider understanding of their operating environment. They invest time in building trust with individuals who might seem unimportant, but possess crucial knowledge. When entering any new situation, a job, a market, a community, or even a social group, your first strategic priority should be identifying and cultivating relationships with local guides. These relationships require mutual benefit. You must offer value in return for the knowledge and access they provide. Remember that local guides often have more to teach you than formal experts, and their knowledge can provide competitive advantages that no amount of external research can match. In my command tent stands a unique military banner, the flexible formation standard designed with removable elements that could be reconfigured to signal different battle formations as conditions changed. This banner represents one of my most crucial discoveries. Successful strategy requires the ability to adapt tactics while maintaining consistent strategic direction. Rigidity in method destroys more armies than enemy action. I learned this lesson during a campaign where everything went wrong according to our original plans, yet we achieved complete victory through tactical adaptation. We had prepared for conventional battlefield engagement, but unexpected flooding changed the terrain completely. Our cavalry advantages became irrelevant in muddy conditions. Our planned formations became impossible to maintain, and our traditional tactics were suddenly useless. My officers wanted to retreat and wait for better conditions, but I recognized that our enemies faced the same challenges we did. The question was not whether to adapt, but how quickly and effectively we could adapt compared to our opponents. Instead of trying to force our original tactics to work in impossible conditions, we completely reimagined our approach. We abandoned cavalry charges in favor of infantry tactics. We turned the muddy terrain from a hindrance into an advantage by using local knowledge of stable ground that enemy forces lacked. We shifted from direct assault to harassment tactics that exhausted enemy forces while preserving our own. Most importantly, we maintained our strategic objective of controlling the valley while completely changing our methods for achieving that objective. The victory that followed was more complete than our original plan would have delivered, precisely because we had adapted to circumstances our enemies could not handle. They remained committed to tactics that no longer worked, while we evolved our methods to match reality. This principle is essential for success in rapidly changing modern environments. Markets shift, technologies evolve, organizational priorities change, and personal circumstances transform faster than long-term plans can accommodate. The leaders and individuals who thrive are not those with the most detailed plans, but those who can maintain strategic direction while adapting their methods continuously. In your career, this might mean pursuing the same objective advancement, recognition, or skill development through different methods as opportunities and obstacles appear. If networking events don't yield results, perhaps mentorship relationships will. If traditional promotion paths are blocked, perhaps lateral moves create better advancement opportunities. If your industry is transforming, perhaps new skills will achieve the same career objectives your previous skills served. The key distinction is between strategy and tactics. Your strategy is your fundamental direction and objectives, what you want to achieve and why. Your tactics are your specific methods and actions, how you pursue those objectives. Strategy should remain relatively stable, while tactics should be continuously adjusted based on feedback and changing conditions. Most people make one of two mistakes. They change both strategy and tactics constantly, never maintaining consistent direction long enough to achieve meaningful results, or they maintain both strategy and tactics rigidly, refusing to adapt methods even when they clearly aren't working. Success requires strategic consistency combined with tactical flexibility. Know what you're trying to achieve and why, but remain completely open to changing how you pursue those objectives as you learn more about what works and what doesn't. The flexible formation banner reminds me that strength comes not from rigidity, but from the ability to maintain purpose while adapting method to circumstances. The General's Seal of Authority sits on my desk as a reminder of the most important leadership lesson I ever learned. You cannot lead others effectively until you have achieved unity of command within yourself. This carved jade seal unified all military orders under single, clear authority. But its deeper meaning relates to the internal unity required before external leadership becomes possible. Early in my career, I commanded a force where every officer had different opinions about our objectives, different preferences for tactics, and different levels of commitment to our mission. Meetings became debates, orders became suggestions, and our forces moved with the confused uncertainty that reflects divided leadership. I blamed my subordinates for lacking discipline and loyalty. But the real problem was that I had not achieved internal unity about our direction. I was simultaneously trying to please multiple constituencies: my superiors who wanted quick victories, my troops who wanted minimal casualties, local authorities who wanted their territories protected, and my own desire for tactical innovation. These competing priorities created contradictory signals that confused everyone under my command. I was giving mixed messages because I had mixed objectives. The crisis came during a critical engagement where our forces hesitated at the moment when decisive action was required. Officers looked to me for clear direction, but I was still internally debating which of several competing priorities should take precedence. In that moment of hesitation, we lost an opportunity that cost lives and strategic position. That night, I created what I called my personal command protocol, a clear hierarchy of priorities that would guide every decision I made. First priority was the safety and effectiveness of my forces. Second was achieving our strategic objectives. Third was minimizing broader collateral damage. Fourth was innovation and tactical development. Everything else was subordinate to these four principles. More importantly, I recognized that unity of command begins with unity within the commander. Before I could give clear, consistent direction to others, I had to resolve my own internal conflicts about what mattered most. I had to choose which voice in my head would have authority over all the others. This internal unity transformed my external leadership immediately. When officers brought me complex situations, I no longer wrestled publicly with competing considerations. I had a clear framework for making decisions quickly and communicating them simply. When my superiors gave conflicting directions, I had principles for resolving contradictions rather than trying to satisfy everyone simultaneously. Most importantly, my troops began to trust my leadership because they could predict my decision-making process even in novel situations. They knew that certain principles would always take precedence, certain values would never be compromised, and certain standards would consistently apply. This principle applies directly to leading yourself in modern life. Most people struggle with personal effectiveness because they have competing internal authorities, the part that wants security conflicts with the part that wants growth. The part that values relationships conflicts with the part that wants achievement. The part that seeks comfort conflicts with the part that demands excellence. Effective self-leadership requires establishing clear priority hierarchies for your own decision-making. When you face competing demands on your time, competing opportunities, or competing values, you need internal protocols that determine which considerations take precedence. Unity of command means one voice has final authority, whether in an army or in your own mind. Establish that authority within yourself before attempting to lead others. My collection of hand-drawn terrain study sketches represents countless hours spent understanding the geography that would determine victory or defeat. These detailed maps show not just physical features, but strategic implications, which positions offered advantages, which terrain channeled enemy movement, and where natural features could be leveraged for maximum effect. I learned that understanding your environment is often more important than understanding your enemy. During one crucial campaign, I faced an opponent whose forces significantly outnumbered mine and whose tactical skills matched my own. Traditional military analysis suggested we were at severe disadvantage, but I had spent weeks studying the terrain where our conflict would unfold. While my opponent focused on troop strength and battle formations, I focused on how geography would shape every aspect of our engagement. The battlefield contained a series of ridges that appeared to favor defensive positions, but my detailed study revealed something crucial. The prevailing winds in that region created specific patterns that would affect visibility, communication, and morale throughout different times of day. More importantly, seasonal rains had created drainage patterns that would channel any retreat through predictable bottlenecks. I positioned my forces not where they appeared strongest, but where the terrain gave us maximum leverage over enemy movement. We occupied positions that seemed inferior on paper, but created conditions where our smaller numbers could control larger areas effectively. When engagement began, geography became our ally in ways my opponent had not anticipated. The victory was decisive, not because of superior tactics or better troops, but because we had leveraged environmental advantages that our enemies either had not recognized or had underestimated. We fought where the terrain multiplied our strengths and amplified their weaknesses. This principle transforms how you approach competitive situations in modern life. Every environment, whether a workplace, an industry, a social setting, or a marketplace, has its own terrain features that create advantages and disadvantages for different approaches in your career. Organizational terrain includes formal structures like reporting, relationships, and budget processes, but also informal elements like communication patterns, cultural values, decision-making styles, and relationship networks. Understanding this terrain helps you position yourself where your strengths have maximum impact and where organizational dynamics work in your favor. Market terrain includes customer preferences, competitive dynamics, regulatory environments, technology trends, and economic cycles. Successful businesses position themselves where these forces create advantages rather than fighting against environmental realities. Social terrain includes cultural norms, relationship networks, communication styles, and influence patterns. Understanding social terrain helps you build relationships and advance ideas in ways that work with rather than against social dynamics. The key is systematic environmental analysis before taking action. Just as I studied physical geography through direct observation and detailed mapping, you must study your operational environment through careful attention to how things actually work rather than how they appear to work formally. Look for environmental features that others overlook, the informal influence networks that determine how decisions really get made, the seasonal patterns that create opportunities and obstacles, the cultural currents that help or hinder different approaches. Position yourself where environmental forces multiply your efforts rather than fighting against them. Choose timing that takes advantage of natural cycles. Select methods that work with rather than against the terrain you actually face. Remember that superior positioning often matters more than superior resources. The right position in favorable terrain can defeat larger forces operating from inferior positions. The campaign supply ledger on my desk contains detailed records of every resource required for successful military operations, not just obvious needs like weapons and food, but everything from replacement sandals to messenger horses to medical supplies. This ledger taught me that victory belongs not to those with the most resources, but to those who use resources most efficiently. War is ultimately an economic competition disguised as military conflict. I learned this lesson during a campaign where we faced an enemy with seemingly unlimited resources. Their supply trains stretched for miles, their forces were well equipped, and their financial backing appeared inexhaustible. My advisors worried that we could not compete with such wealth and abundance, but I recognized that abundance often creates waste, while scarcity forces efficiency. Instead of trying to match their resource expenditure, I focused on maximizing the strategic value of every resource we possessed. Where they used 10 units of supply to achieve 1 unit of effect, we designed operations that achieved 10 units of effect from 1 unit of supply. We turned their abundance into a liability by forcing them to maintain expensive positions while we operated with lean, mobile efficiency. The campaign became a contest of resource efficiency rather than resource abundance. Every day they maintained their large, expensive force was a day that drained their treasury. Every operation we conducted was designed to achieve maximum strategic impact with minimum resource expenditure. Over time, our efficiency advantage overcame their resource advantage. Victory came not through superior wealth, but through superior resource management. They could afford to waste resources for months, but not indefinitely. We could maintain lean operations indefinitely, creating a strategic advantage that compound over time. This principle is crucial for success in resource-constrained modern life. Whether you're managing time, money, energy, or attention, efficiency often matters more than abundance. The person who uses resources strategically can achieve better results than someone with more resources but less discipline in your career. Time is your most precious resource. The strategic question is not how to get more time, but how to generate maximum career advancement from the time you have available. This means focusing energy on activities that create compound benefits rather than just immediate results. Energy management follows similar principles. Instead of trying to work longer hours, focus on identifying which activities generate the highest return on energy invested. Some tasks drain energy while producing minimal results. Others energize you while creating significant progress toward important objectives. Financial resources require the same strategic thinking. Instead of focusing only on earning more money, develop systems for extracting maximum life satisfaction and strategic advantage from your current financial resources. Often, strategic spending creates more value than increased earning. Attention is perhaps your most valuable resource in the modern economy. Your ability to focus deeply on important work while avoiding distraction determines your effectiveness. More than raw intelligence or credentials, protecting and directing attention strategically creates competitive advantages in any field. The key insight from my campaign supply ledger is that resource constraints force innovation and efficiency that abundance never creates. Learn to see limitations not as obstacles but as forces that drive you toward more strategic thinking. Remember that those with abundant resources often waste them through lack of discipline, while those with limited resources often achieve superior results through strategic necessity. Among my most treasured documents is the Mercy Proclamation, a decree outlining how conquered enemies would be treated with respect and offered opportunities to join our cause rather than face punishment or slavery. This document represents my understanding that true victory requires winning not just battles, but the psychological allegiance of those you defeat. The greatest conquest is transforming enemies into allies. The insight came during my first major victory, when traditional practice would have demanded harsh treatment of captured enemy forces. My advisors expected execution of enemy leaders, enslavement of troops, and seizure of all resources from conquered territories. But I recognized that such treatment would create permanent enmity, require constant military occupation, and generate endless rebellions. Instead, I announced that enemy soldiers who chose to join our cause would receive equal treatment with our original forces. Enemy officers who demonstrated loyalty would be eligible for command positions based on merit. Conquered territories that cooperated would receive protection and fair governance rather than exploitation. This approach seemed weak to my traditional military advisors, but it proved strategically brilliant. Word of our merciful treatment spread faster than our armies moved, creating psychological advantages that prevented conflicts before they began. Enemy forces began surrendering rather than fighting hopeless battles. Local populations welcomed rather than resisted our approach. Most importantly, former enemies became genuinely loyal allies because their allegiance was based on mutual benefit rather than fear. They fought harder for our cause than some of my original troops because they had chosen to join us rather than been conscripted into service. This psychological strategy multiplied our effective force without increasing our actual numbers. Every enemy we converted into an ally was simultaneously one fewer opponent and one additional supporter. The mathematics of this transformation were more powerful than any tactical innovation. The principle applies directly to modern competitive situations. In business, workplace conflicts, and personal relationships, the goal should not be defeating others, but creating conditions where former opponents choose to support your objectives because doing so serves their interests as well. In workplace dynamics, this means solving conflicts in ways that allow everyone to maintain dignity and find benefit. When you disagree with colleagues, focus on finding solutions that address their concerns while advancing your objectives. Make it easy for people to change their positions without losing face in competitive business situations. This might mean creating partnerships with former competitors, developing win-win solutions that serve multiple parties' interests, or building industry coalitions that benefit everyone involved rather than zero-sum competitions. The key insight is that sustainable success requires willing cooperation from others. Cooperation based on mutual benefit lasts longer and requires less energy to maintain than compliance based on force or fear. This requires genuine consideration of others' needs and perspectives. Surface-level attempts at psychological influence fail because people recognize manipulation. But authentic efforts to create mutually beneficial outcomes build lasting alliances that strengthen your position over time. Remember that every person you encounter has motivations, concerns, and objectives that may align with yours if you invest effort in understanding them. The most powerful psychological warfare involves helping others achieve their goals while advancing your own. True victory creates willing allies from former opponents through generous treatment and mutual benefit, rather than domination and exploitation. The focused flame torch in my collection was specially designed for siege warfare, a precision instrument that could start fires in exact locations for maximum strategic effect. Unlike ordinary torches that created widespread but unfocused destruction, this tool represented the principle of concentrated force, applying maximum pressure at the precise point where it will generate decisive results. Scattered effort produces scattered results, but concentrated force creates breakthrough achievements. I discovered the power of concentration during a siege where conventional attacks had failed repeatedly. The enemy fortress appeared impregnable, with thick walls, abundant supplies, and determined defenders. My forces were becoming demoralized by weeks of ineffective assaults that achieved nothing while depleting our resources and morale, rather than continuing broad attacks against the entire fortress perimeter. I studied the structure carefully to identify its single point of maximum vulnerability. Intelligence gathering revealed that the fortress's water supply depended on one protected reservoir, accessible through a single, heavily defended entrance. Instead of attacking everywhere at once, I concentrated our entire force on capturing and controlling that one critical point. While the enemy spread their defenses across the entire perimeter, we focused overwhelming force on the narrow area that controlled their survival. Once we controlled their water supply, the entire fortress became untenable regardless of the strength of their walls or weapons. The victory was swift and decisive, precisely because we concentrated maximum force where it would generate maximum effect. The same resources that had been ineffective when scattered became overwhelming when focused. This principle transforms how you approach goals and challenges in modern life. Most people scatter their efforts across multiple objectives simultaneously, making minimal progress on many fronts, rather than breakthrough progress on the most important front, in career development. This means identifying the single skill, relationship, or achievement that would create the greatest advancement opportunity. Then concentrating your development efforts on that priority rather than trying to improve everything simultaneously. In skill building, this means achieving mastery in one area before moving to others, rather than developing mediocre competence across many areas. Deep expertise in one domain often creates more opportunities than surface knowledge in multiple domains. In business development, this means focusing on the one customer segment, product feature, or market opportunity that offers the greatest potential for growth, rather than pursuing multiple strategies that dilute your competitive advantages. The key is identifying your critical leverage point, the place where concentrated effort will generate disproportionate results. This requires honest analysis of which opportunities offer the greatest potential return on your investment of time and energy. Most people avoid this kind of focus because concentration requires sacrifice. Focusing on one priority means saying no to other opportunities that seem attractive. But scattered effort rarely generates the momentum needed for breakthrough results. Concentration also requires persistence. Unlike the immediate gratification of working on multiple projects simultaneously, focused effort often requires sustained commitment before results become visible. But the compound effects of concentration ultimately generate more progress than the linear effects of scattered effort. Remember that your time, energy, and attention are finite resources. The question is not whether to focus, but where to focus. For maximum effect, use the focused flame approach. Identify your strategic leverage point, then apply concentrated force until you achieve breakthrough results. The fortress that cannot be taken by scattered attacks often falls quickly to concentrated force applied at the right point. The Spymaster's Codebook represents one of my most sophisticated strategic innovations, an encrypted communication system that allowed me to coordinate intelligence agents across vast territories while maintaining operational security. This coded language enabled information flow that gave us decisive advantages over enemies who operated with limited, delayed, or inaccurate intelligence. In warfare, as in life, information is power, but only when it is accurate, timely, and actionable. My intelligence network developed from a simple recognition. Armies win battles, but information wins wars. The commander, who knows enemy capabilities, intentions, and weaknesses before engagement begins, holds advantages that superior numbers cannot overcome. But building effective intelligence systems requires more than hiring spies. It requires creating relationships, establishing trust, and managing information flow systematically. I developed multiple information gathering streams that operated independently but fed into centralized analysis. Merchants traveling trade routes provided economic intelligence about enemy resources and supply situations. Diplomatic contacts offered insights into political pressures and alliance possibilities. Former enemy soldiers who had joined our cause brought detailed knowledge of opposing forces, capabilities, and leadership patterns. Most importantly, I created feedback systems that allowed field agents to report changing conditions quickly while maintaining operational security. The coded communication system ensured that critical intelligence reached decision-makers while remaining meaningless to anyone who intercepted our messages. This network provided advantages that determined outcomes before battles began. We knew enemy troop movements before they were fully committed. We understood supply constraints that limited enemy options. We recognized leadership conflicts that created exploitable weaknesses. We anticipated strategic decisions because we understood the information and pressures that would drive them. The same principles apply to navigating competitive environments in modern life. Whether you're advancing in your career, building a business, or pursuing any significant objective, systematic information gathering creates strategic advantages that talent and hard work alone cannot provide. In your career, this means developing relationships that provide insights into industry trends, organizational changes, upcoming opportunities, and competitive dynamics. Administrative assistants often understand organizational politics better than senior executives. Customers frequently see market shifts before companies recognize them. Colleagues in other departments possess information about strategic priorities that affect your work. Building these intelligence networks requires offering value in return for information. People share insights with those who help them achieve their objectives or provide useful information in return. The most effective intelligence gathering is relationship-based rather than transactional. The key is systematic rather than random. Information gathering. Identify the types of information that would most improve your decision-making. Then build relationships with people who possess that information. Create regular communication patterns that provide ongoing intelligence, rather than one-time insights. Modern intelligence gathering must respect ethical boundaries. This means building relationships honestly, sharing information appropriately, and never using confidential information in ways that harm those who trust you. Effective intelligence networks depend on mutual trust and benefit rather than manipulation or betrayal. Technology amplifies intelligence gathering capabilities through social media monitoring, industry publications, professional networks, and market research tools. But technology supplements rather than replaces relationship-based intelligence gathering. Remember that information without analysis generates confusion rather than advantage. Raw intelligence must be processed into actionable insights that improve decision-making. The goal is not accumulating information, but developing understanding that creates strategic advantages. Your personal intelligence network should provide early warning about changes that affect your objectives and opportunities that others miss. The Victory Feast invitation in my possession may be the most strategically important document I ever created. Invitation sent to former enemies immediately after defeating them, inviting them to join a celebration of our mutual future rather than a commemoration of their defeat. This invitation represents my understanding that how you handle victory determines whether your success creates lasting benefits or temporary advantages that generate future conflicts. The temptation after achieving significant victory is to celebrate dominance, extract maximum benefit from your superior position, and establish clear hierarchies that prevent future challenges. This satisfies immediate emotional needs and appears to maximize short-term advantages, but it creates resentment, motivates revenge, and ensures that former opponents will work against your interests whenever opportunities arise. After one decisive military victory, my advisors expected me to demand tribute, impose harsh terms, and demonstrate our superior strength through treatment of the defeated enemy. Traditional practice suggested taking advantage of our position to extract maximum concessions while our opponents were vulnerable. Instead, I chose a different approach based on long-term strategic thinking. I invited former enemy leaders to a feast celebrating not their defeat but our mutual opportunity to build something better together. I offered them positions of responsibility in our expanded alliance, based on their capabilities rather than their former allegiances. I presented victory not as our domination over them, but as liberation from the conflicts that had prevented all of us from achieving greater objectives. This approach required significant restraint and strategic patience. It meant foregoing immediate benefits that our victory had earned. It meant treating former opponents with respect they had not shown us. It meant investing resources in building relationships, rather than extracting wealth from our superior position. But the long-term results exceeded anything that traditional victory exploitation could have achieved. Former enemies became genuinely loyal allies because they benefited from their association with our cause. They contributed their capabilities to our objectives because doing so served their interests as well as ours. Most importantly, they advocated for our approach with others, expanding our influence without requiring military conquest. This principle applies directly to competitive success in modern contexts. When you achieve significant victories, promotions, business successes, personal achievements, how you handle that success determines whether it creates sustainable advantages or temporary gains that generate future problems. In workplace situations, this means using success to build stronger relationships rather than establish dominance over colleagues. When you win competitive situations, focus on creating conditions where everyone benefits rather than maximizing your individual advantage. Make it easy for former competitors to become allies by ensuring they see benefits from your success. In business relationships, this means structuring successful deals so that all parties gain value, rather than extracting maximum benefit from temporary negotiating advantages. Sustainable business success depends on partners wanting to work with you again rather than feeling exploited by previous interactions. The key insight is that sustainable success requires willing cooperation from others. Victory that creates resentment motivates opposition, while victory that creates mutual benefit builds lasting support networks. Remember that every victory creates a choice. You can use your success to dominate others or to build stronger relationships that multiply your future opportunities. True strategic thinking focuses on second-order effects rather than immediate gains. Win the peace that follows victory by ensuring that your success creates benefits for others as well as yourself. The student's graduated sword rests in my hands as I offer these final words. Ceremonial weapon I presented to my most accomplished student when his strategic understanding surpassed the need for my guidance. This sword represents the transmission of strategic wisdom from one generation to the next, and the responsibility that comes with possessing knowledge that can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. When you began this journey, you felt like life was constantly attacking you from all sides. You were reactive rather than strategic, fighting battles chosen by others rather than pursuing objectives aligned with your deepest purposes. You survived each day's challenges, but never achieved the breakthrough progress you sought. Now you possess the same strategic principles that guided me through decades of successful campaigns. You understand that true victory comes from winning before the battle begins, from knowing yourself and your environment so completely that you can position yourself where success becomes inevitable rather than uncertain. You have learned to see beyond surface-level conflicts to the deeper psychological, economic, and strategic dynamics that determine outcomes. You recognize that information is power, that timing often matters more than strength, and that sustainable success requires turning former opponents into willing allies rather than dominated enemies. These principles will compound in their effects over time. Strategic thinking becomes more powerful as you gain experience applying these concepts to increasingly complex situations. The intelligence networks you build will provide advantages that multiply. The relationships you develop through generous victory will create opportunities you cannot yet imagine. But with this knowledge comes responsibility. Strategic wisdom can be used to create value for many people or to exploit others for personal gain. The choice is yours, and it will define not just your success, but your character and legacy. I challenge you to use these principles ethically, generously, and in service of objectives larger than immediate personal gain. Help others develop strategic thinking rather than hoarding these advantages for yourself. Create value for your communities, organizations, and relationships rather than extracting value from them. The world needs more strategic thinkers who use their capabilities to solve meaningful problems rather than just advance their personal positions. Every environment you enter, your workplace, your family, your community will benefit from the strategic clarity you can now provide. Your transformation from reactive to strategic living begins with your next decision. Will you approach tomorrow's challenges with the same scattered, emotional responses that created today's frustrations? Or will you pause, analyze the strategic landscape, identify your key leverage points, and act with the clarity and purpose these principles provide? The choice is yours, but the potential is limitless. You now possess strategic wisdom that has guided successful leaders for over 2 millennia. Use it wisely, use it generously, and use it to create the life and legacy you truly want. Remember that mastery comes through application, not just understanding. These principles become powerful only when you consistently apply them to real situations. Learn from the results and refine your strategic thinking through experience. Take up your own graduated sword. Your strategic education is complete, but your strategic journey is just beginning. Go forth and build the life worthy of the wisdom you now possess. The battlefield of life awaits your strategic mastery.